As you know, I live my life by this principle to settle for more, and sometimes that means giving a gift to yourself in the face of adversity, or in this case, trauma. 2 years ago, Mandy Bass was at home, alone in Florida, when she discovered an intruder. What happened next will shock you, and we also think it will show you the power of the human spirit.
I'm a consultant and I work out of my home. It was a Super Bowl Sunday and I was working at my desk when I heard glass breaking on the other side of the house. I went to go investigate to see what had happened, and then out of the shadow I saw this man coming toward me, and he actually looked just like a normal 21-year-old kid. The only thing was the craziness in his eyes that really made me realize that there was something wrong. This is where the assault began. He hit me to the ground, and at one point he was kicking me in the ribs and screaming, "Do you believe in the forgiveness of Jesus Christ?" Next thing I knew, his fist just smashed into my face. He just started this brutal assault as if I were the devil and he was trying to kill me. At one point he helped me up and I thought the whole thing was over, and just the minute I got up he hit me again, and I at that point knew that I had to find a way to get out or I was going to die. Somehow I was able to get myself to my feet and I started running towards the front door. Before I could get out, he grabbed me around the waist, and when I swung around, he had picked up this very heavy chair and he was lunging toward me, aiming it at my head. And I put my arm up and blocked, and it broke my arm. And I had concussion. My face was black and blue and really bruised.
Unbelievable. Luckily, Mandy Bass made it out of her door and into the arms of the police who were waiting outside. Mandy is here with us now, and the man who attacked her will join us in a moment. Mandy has written a book about her experience called Taming the Takalash. She's here to talk about it. Great to see you. Looking so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
We'll get to the title of the book in a second, which is, would confuse some of us. But you walk us through those moments where you knew you were under attack. Did you think that he was going to kill you?
Yes, I knew that if I didn't get out, I was sure I was going to die that day.
So you feel the reason you lived is because you were able to block him with that chair and run?
Well, there's no way to know, but I'm very happy that I was able to, block with my arm. And because obviously there was something going on that I had no idea about, so.
This is everybody's worst nightmare. In the safety of your home, minding your own business, not doing anything, to be attacked to within an inch of your life. I mean, the trauma that comes from that physically is one thing. The psychological trauma is probably more significant.
Right. Yeah, the physical injuries within a couple of months had pretty much, I'd made my way through them. But emotionally, I was very lucky to be able to have some skills and people around me who really helped me with the trauma. But emotionally, it was a very, very difficult time, and just very difficult to do ordinary things. As crazy as it sounds, it was, I was afraid to leave the house afterwards. So even though the attack had happened,
doesn't sound crazy.
Even though the attack had happened inside the house, I sort of made that my little fortress.
You run outside, the police are there. The police had been there, sitting outside while she was getting attacked. They say because of protocol. They saw him run into your house?
They saw him break the window. They saw him get over the fence, and they witnessed him. That's what the police report says, that they saw him break my window. And, they didn't know what was going on. I wasn't aware that they were out until I escaped from the house. I didn't know that they were out there the whole time.
We reached out to the police for comment. I mean, they were there while she was getting brutally attacked, and they have not returned our calls, although previously they've said it was because of protocol, you know, waiting for backup, waiting to figure out what the situation was that they'd be running into and so on. When you went to the hospital for treatment of your injuries and that night you had to return home, tell us what the scene was when you walked back into that home by yourself.
So it was a really cold night, and the window had been broken, so the police had secured the house with a hurricane shutter, but it was still cold. You could still feel the wind coming through. And when we walked in, it was really eerie. A young police officer took me through the house, turned on all the lights, and then left. And I was there alone with this broken window. There was blood everywhere. There was gloss everywhere. And when I had left the hospital, they had wanted me to stay, and I was afraid because I have 2 cats. And I'd asked the police, I was communicating with them while I was in the emergency room, and I was saying, please make sure my cats are okay, because when I left, I was afraid to leave them.
So as you might imagine, Mandy was very angry about what happened to her, and she did something with that anger. And we'll talk about it next when we meet the man who attacked her, and his backstory will stun you. Before the break, we heard the dramatic story of Mandy Bass, who had an intruder break into her home and brutally attack her. But there is another story we have to tell you, that of the young man who assaulted Mandy.
I grew up in Amityville, New York with my mom, dad, sister, who's a genius, and we just always reached for the stars. My parents encouraged us. I was a Boy Scout. I played the trumpet, I was the prom king, I was the drum major in my marching band. I was just all around town known as Kevin Jackman, just good exemplary kid, and never got into fights in school, never been suspended. So when I was 18, I decided to go to school for mechanical engineering, and I walked onto the track team. I was in fraternity, I ran for executive council, I was an Eagle Scout, and a volunteer firefighter. I have a very, very mild temper. I never got angry, I never yelled, I never had any type of angry bone in my body. Well, I was peer pressured. It was a built-up thing, and you know, 22 in college, I was offered by friends to take this drug. I had a complete loss of reality, complete loss of myself, complete loss of control. I didn't know what was up and down. I went absolutely crazy. I was on the run. I went out of my house, so I'm running for my life. My twisted logic was, I'm on the run, there are cops after me, I don't want to get shot in the street, I need to get into a house. And I resort to breaking into a window. And around now, it gets fuzzy. I'm bleeding, I have glass all over me. And I walk in and I see Mandy Bass in the living room. And that's when I assault her. She's able to escape, brutally injured. It's like, okay, all right, I'm quiet, what happens? Wait a minute, what? Oh my God, and then Kevin Jackman come out of the house right now, and it's like, oh my God. I get on my stomach, put my hands behind my neck, and I pray.
He was facing life plus 20 years in prison. That's what he was looking at, and so within an instant, his life changed into a living nightmare.
On November 11th, 2016, Kevin Jackman and Mandy Bass actually met at her attorney's office. And it was a meeting that would change both of their lives. Mandy and Kevin are both here with us now. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Amazingly, there's been forgiveness. There's been forgiveness, which I want to get to, and that's what this story is truly about at its heart. But before we get to that, they sent the dogs in to get you.
Yes.
Tell us about the first moment you realized what you had done.
Well, so I realized what I'd done, and it's very fuzzy. So when I had that noise out when Mandy had left the house, I was alone, and that was the first time where I was alone, no distractions, and I started to come back and realize, and I had frankly said, well, people have gotten killed for a lot less. So I accepted death, and I said, you know, right now, if this is what I had done, if my memory serves me right, I deserve to die. And I got on my knees, and I needed to leave some type of message, and this has come back to me over time, and I said if I could leave one message, and my life flashed before my eyes, and I said I won't get to see my family again. I won't, if I die, I leave this earth, I won't get to graduate, and just a lot of things that I realized, took for granted, I never realized I'd complete. So I wrote the note, and I said, do not use LSD, if that's the one thing, because I was able to pinpoint why this happened, why I had done that.
Even in that state, you were aware of the fact that drugs had driven you to this point.
Yeah, and before that, before I even entered the house, I was going insane, and all I wanted to do was to make it stop. And it was like I was being on a roller coaster where I couldn't get off. I was being held there, and I didn't want it anymore, and I couldn't escape. And I kept going back and forth between this state of being aware of what's going on and then slipping back into extreme paranoia, completely irrational thinking, and it resulted in this.
Had you ever tried LSD before?
Never. Never, ever.
And they think that you were given an LSD cocktail, that there was something,
yeah.
It was laced, and that's one of the fears in doing drugs, is that not only are you going to get the drug, which is probably not a great idea, but you're going to get something else. I mean, just to pause and take a moment to those out there, young men or women who are thinking, what could it hurt? You know, one time I'll try it, I'll get high. Your message is?
Don't do it. Don't. There's so much at stake. I had been a person who had never, I was a firefighter, Eagle Scout, and a lot of people, they say, everyone makes mistakes, but it's before the mistakes, the decisions. And all this was one decision. And you have to think, and I was offered the LSD, and I really didn't want to do it, but it was, you know, it's my friends, they're peer pressuring me to do it, and, you know, I'll get past it, and I'll get by it, and I'll never have to do it again. But it's that one moment changed everything. And of course, I had no precept of thinking that it could happen to me. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think it can't happen.
Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them. So how did it come to be that these two people can sit next to one another? And when he first came out here, they hugged. How can they be hugging now after what happened? And how did they get to that place? We'll talk about that right after the break. One woman attacked and the young man who attacked her. And here they sit side by side, which in and of itself is remarkable. Look, you, Mandy, originally were angry, and you wanted Kevin to spend 20 years in prison.
Right.
You wanted him to go to jail.
Right.
And then something happened, and you had a change of heart. What?
Well, it wasn't just a sudden thing. I was working on knowing that I needed to work on forgiveness for myself in order to let go of the anger in me, in order for me to heal. You know, and that was initially, and I did a lot of work around that. And then in November, we had, one of the things I wanted to do was to meet him face to face. I knew that we were going to have a plea, some type of a plea bargain, that we wouldn't have a trial. And I wanted to make sure, I wanted him to see the pictures. I wanted to make sure that he knew what he had done. I wanted him to take responsibility. So we set up this meeting where we could meet him face to face. At that time, you know, I wasn't quite sure what the right thing to do would be in terms of what his, you know, what his sentence should be. But I was working on forgiveness, and then I knew that part of that was to come face to face and have a conversation.
And when you saw her face to face, what was that like for you?
It was something that I knew needed to happen, because all throughout the trial while it was ongoing, all I wanted to do was apologize, but I couldn't have any contact. And it was, to be able to have that meeting, I was very much looking forward to it, of course nervous, but I needed to say my piece and show how sorry I was, because I never wanted that to happen. If I could rewind time, it would have been the first thing that I could have done. Mm-hmm. But it was, I needed that, because I was carrying such a guilt, and I needed to be able to drop those burdens.
This is a guy, Kevin was an Eagle Scout, as you mentioned. He was the prom king, musician, active in his community, senior at Florida Institute of Technology, studying marketing in a fraternity on track and field. Guy had his whole life in front of him. And had you pushed for the harshest sentence possible, the odds are you would have been listened to, or you could have had a negative impact on his future for sure, and no one would have blamed you. But instead, you decided to push for something else, leniency. Why?
Well, when we met, I had this amazing experience. When I saw Kevin and his dad walk into the room,
His dad's here. Hi. And his mom.
I just had this experience. I mean, that day going into the meeting, I'd sort of given it to God. I'd sort of gone into the state of surrender, and it was like, just, you know, whatever you want to have happen, just may it be. And the atmosphere was really thick in the room, as you can imagine, when they walked in. And when Kevin came and stood next to me after I'd greeted his lawyer and his dad, I was trying to make light of the situation, and so I said to him, "Gee, you don't look nearly as scary as you did the last time I saw you."
Oh.
And with that, I could see him starting just to shake, and I could just feel him starting to break. And I just instinctively went toward him and just put my arms around him. And he started sobbing in my arms, in my shoulder, just sobbing and crying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And I told him that I forgave him, that God forgave him, and that it was going to be all right. And it was if in that moment, all the divides between us just disappeared, and all I felt was love.
Your dad is crying? You're crying? What does that bring up for you?
So appreciative for life, you know. I've never put my parents or my family in this position. I've never been in a position like this, and that memory is, I'll never forget that till the day I die. And it was so much needed, and I was on autopilot. I can remember shaking, and I didn't remember until I read it in the book how descriptive it was, and she did a wonderful job at displaying how it felt, and it's like I'd gained a second mother that day, and I just felt like I was 5 years old, and it was to have that forgiveness from her was all that I needed at that time, because I didn't know what was going to be in store for me.
Mandy actually protected Kevin's identity in her book. He has chosen to come forward and say, "I am the one," to help others understand drugs, conflict, and the power of forgiveness. More on the opposite side of the break. We're back now with Mandy Bass and the young man who attacked her, Kevin Jackman. Mandy's written a book called Taming the Takalash, which is a scary monster in South African culture that children talk about. And the power of forgiveness is the message in her book. Let me ask you, Kevin, she gave you a job reference. Tell the audience what ultimately your sentence was.
5 years probation and community service. Slap on the wrist, really. I'm so thankful for, you know, little things like being able to walk in my apartment that I can afford by myself in Atlanta and have the lights come on, be able to take a bath, go to the bathroom in privacy. It's just the little things. So and I wouldn't have been able to have that without the love from everyone, the love from my job, my work family, the love from Mandy, love from everyone that had this effect on where I am.
He has her programmed into his phone as Mama Mandy. And what's the one thing you want our audience to know, Mandy?
I think the most important thing is that whatever we go through in life, we have a lot of obstacles that we have to go through. But if you're willing to take responsibility for your own life, which is not about blame, it's really about your own state, then from every adversity, you can make something truly beautiful. The worst thing that ever could happen to you can be the best thing that can ever happen to you, and it's really important that we remember that.
Thank you both so much. We'll be right back. You don't always get a television moment like the ones we just shared with one another. Please come join with us